Today's episode is brought to you by We Break You Buy. Interested in sports cards and memorabilia? Check out We Break You Buy on TikTok. We Break You Buy is a small operation run by three brothers, offering spots for a chance at winning some incredible sports cards and memorabilia. That's We Break You Buy. Check it out today on TikTok. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Why Wasn't It Better? I am your host, Patrick Darms.
And I'm Anton Paras, your co-host.
Lovely for you to be here, Anton. And we have a return guest.
Yeah.
Nathan, welcome back.
Hey, glad to be here. I think this is my fourth appearance now on Why Wasn't It Better?
Nathan,
I believe
the
it
vet.
was. Yeah, veteran.
Yeah.
Do you have anything new and exciting you want to share with our listeners?
Well, I can say that in preparation for the film that we are watching today, I did get to practice some skiing this week. That was
Excellent.
That is exciting.
Yeah. You know, I
How
really
fast
wanted
did
to
you
get
go?
the mindset of, James Bond and crew.
How fast do you think you hit, like top speed downhill?
It's a good question. Before I ended up on my ass, or
Yeah, no, just like you can give us a rough ballpark. You think like 150 miles per hour?
you know what? That sounds about right. I think about 150 downhill. Definitely, that's what I did on the first day that I learned how to ski. Was 150 miles downhill. Yeah.
Excellent. Well,
Sounds about right.
Yeah.
I think that's the average speed.
Yeah.
That's how I gauged it in this movie as well. Today's film is a return to my favorite series, James Bond. We're here to talk about the 6th James Bond film on Her Majesty's Secret Service. And Nathan, I asked you to be on this episode because you're very unfamiliar with these older Bond films. You had never seen this one. You probably didn't even know who George Lazenby was.
I think I had, just through casual learning throughout life, had heard, oh, this is the one, or that he's like the guy who did one Bond film, right?
Mhm.
But I didn't know the timeline or what situated it or anything like that. I can say I'd heard the name before, but had no real context. Again, before this, I had not seen any classic Bond film. Nothing outside of a couple of the Daniel Craig ones.
It's a tragedy.
Well,
but look, we're here to bring you into the world of Bond.
Yeah, it's starting to be rectified, and we started with this one on Her Majesty's Service.
It's a little late now, but I'm now wondering if this was the best one to start you off on. Because this is very highly thought of by James Bond fans. I don't know if casual fans like it. Well, we're going to find out.
I could see that.
Before we start to talk about this film, we have a Bond update, Anton.
Oh, we do. I saw the headlines, and
Yeah, or don't we? Because it's a little unclear. But according to The Sun, Aaron Taylor Johnson has reportedly been offered the role of James Bond. Then Eon said that that's not true. But for what it's worth, back in 2005, it was The Sun that first reported that Daniel Craig had been offered the role several months before the official announcement. And Eon kept denying it even up to 2 days before the actual announcement. All of this may be a moot point. By the time you hear this episode, we may very well have our next official James Bond announced. But at the time of this recording, all we have are rumors.
I can't believe they had such a big name. I mean, Aaron Taylor Johnson, he played Quicksilver in Age of Ultron, and now he's back in the Marvel Studios as Kraven the Hunter. I mean, why now?
I can't answer that question.
Probably.
I'm being very facetious. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Aaron Taylor Johnson as the potential next Bond.
I don't either, and I didn't know how I felt about Daniel Craig at the time either, because I really hadn't seen him in anything.
Oh, I called it. I knew it was going to be great.
Did you?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know what to expect. All I know is that I loved Casino Royale so much. It's a perfect film.
Yeah.
Oh, so you've seen that one, Nathan?
The Craig Casino Royale?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Probably 2, maybe even 3 times. It is.
Oh, okay. So you liked it. Okay.
I so agree that it is a almost like just perfect film in terms of in terms of it. It's just great. I know this isn't an episode where we review Casino Royale, but coming into it, that's kind of a bit of my perspective. Knowing that that's also a reboot and a bit of a, we're trying to be more serious or more kind of, we're not going to be as goofy with it kind of thing.
Right. And of course, this film on Her Majesty's Secret Service, this was their attempt to be serious in the 1960s, because the film that preceded this, You Only Live Twice, was a film that we reviewed pretty recently, Anton, and we really enjoyed it, but we acknowledged it's pretty goofy.
Yeah.
It's got the hollowed out volcano layer.
Okay.
It's got a ninja army in it. It's really spectacular, but it's got some pretty goofy stuff like James Bond going undercover as a Japanese man. If you're interested in seeing that, I have the film for you, Nathan.
Oh, in some ways that sounds a bit appealing, right? I mean, just because I know this one kind of, and we'll talk more about it, kind of lands in maybe an awkward spot in terms of goofiness to seriousness.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure.
Yeah. Where,
well, like I said, it was their attempt.
Right. While as we were talking a little bit before, while also trying to be really faithful to the source material.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember. We're going to get into this discussion of this film in a second, but it is important to remember that they're not really serious novels. They're pulp novels.
Mm-hmm.
They're slapdash novels. You know, they're what's the term for it? Airport novel.
I see.
They were never intended to be high literature, and I think that's really worth pointing out. Like, they're very different from, say, like John le Carré, where it's just super serious, really no humor to speak of. Fleming's stuff is really, it's just pulp stuff. So important to note that when we're talking about this film. And I apologize if you can hear that. That was pretty much the loudest UPS truck I've ever heard.
Good for them.
Well, I think we should get into the discussion of this. What do you say?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Alrighty.
George Lazenby stars in his first and only outing as James Bond. 007's two-year odyssey of tracking down Spectre leader Ernst Stavro Blofeld, who is planning to hold the world ransom by a threat to render all food plants and livestock infertile through the actions of a group of brainwashed angels of death. Along the way, Bond meets, falls in love with, and eventually marries Contessa Teresa Di Vincenzo. Released on December 18th, 1969 by Eon Productions and United Artists, directed by Peter Hunt, screenplay by Richard Maybaum based on the novel by Ian Fleming, starring George Lazenby, Diana Rigg, Telly Savalas, Bernard Lee, Gabrielle Frazzetti, and Ilse Steppe. Budget of $7 million, so $58 million adjusted for inflation, with a box office of $82 million, so $681 million adjusted for inflation. So, Pat, why are we talking about On Her Majesty's Secret Service today?
It's fun to talk about James Bond films. That's it.
That's it. All right.
Yep.
Well, time to go into the reasons.
Yep. Now, this one is especially interesting to talk about because On Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of the most interesting, polarizing films in the series for so many reasons. It's really the last of what's known as the golden age of Bond. Not a coincidence that it was the last one released in the 1960s. Secondly, and most crucially, it is the first film to not feature Sean Connery as James Bond. This would have been an immense deal back then. He was replaced by an Australian model named George Lazenby, who was not really an actor. His claim to fame was he had done a couple of TV adverts.
Not only TV adverts, but chocolate bar commercials.
Correct. Which you can find on YouTube.
While I was looking that up, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought I had seen a note that he had starred in commercials as James Bond? Or did I get that detail wrong?
I think it was a James Bond type character.
Got it.
Probably due to copyright reasons, they couldn't actually say this is James Bond.
Okay, got it. Yeah, which just, at least he's, I guess got the look or something.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it. He really tried. But this film, it made plenty of profit upon its release, but it was instantly seen as a disappointment by the producers Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, who would be pressured by United Artists into bringing Connery back for one more official go in 1971, which would be Diamonds Are Forever. But I remember even as a kid watching this with my dad, I just remember this being dismissed as one of the bad ones just due to Lazenby being, a one-hit wonder. But in the years since, this film's reputation has recovered immensely, and today most Bond films consider it one of the series' best entries. So, Anton, I wanted to do this because it combines my two favorite things, Christmas and James Bond.
That's a beautiful marriage, wouldn't you say?
I think so. I heard Nathan before the podcast trying to question me calling this a Christmas film.
Even despite having watched it literally like half of it yesterday and then the other half of it, like I was finished it 15 minutes before coming on this call. I know that it's got snow, but it wasn't, the Christmas aspect wasn't as in front as maybe other films. But if you want to call it a Christmas film, I'm not going to stop you.
I mean, Blofeld says Merry Christmas, and we see him decorating a Christmas tree.
I was going to say there's a very clear Christmas tree decorating scene with Blofeld. So
fair enough.
Also, did either of you look up the poster for this? This is iconic.
The arms that he's doing while he's skiing.
It's an incredible movie poster. All those old school Bond posters are great. Nathan, how did you feel about being volunteered for this episode to talk about this film?
Well, I thought it was a great, again, not having been a huge, Bond guy or really, it wasn't like my dad's thing when I grew up. I was like, oh, cool, great. And an excuse to finally watch like a classic Bond movie. Never really thought about them much. So on the one hand, I was happy to have like, oh, this is a good excuse for me to do something that I probably wouldn't have done on my own volition. It makes it sound worse than it was. Like I was co-opted.
Wait,
convinced.
I didn't catch it, Nathan. Your dad is a Bond fan or not a Bond fan?
No, he's not a Bond fan.
Oh, okay.
So like, your anecdote, Pat, about like, oh, your dad watching this with your dad. I didn't have that for Bond movies or anything like that. This wasn't like a childhood growing up thing. But, it's an iconic thing, right? I mean, look at all like the parodies of it, right? I'm far more familiar with a lot of those. So it's fun to actually go back and see the original source material and see like what's serious, what's not. I mean, I think after watching it, I'm happy that I did. Let me say that before we get to any more details. So, and I just like an excuse to also hang out with you guys. So whether it's
You are too kind, and I'm glad to hear you say that you thought it was worth it. Anton, what about yourself? History with this film at all?
So I've seen it years ago, and I did not have the same lens of being able to appreciate it for the film that it is. Very fun to jump into it and see with the lens now and the appreciation now, which we'll be able to dive into. But one thing that's always stuck out to me, even when I was younger, was this. I remember when I was younger, it was like, this doesn't seem like the same guy playing James Bond. So we'll touch on that a bit more. But that was something that really stuck out with me.
I should have added this before when I was talking about seeing this as a kid. I did not enjoy this as a kid. I thought it was boring. I didn't know who Lazenby was. I thought I saw him as some kind of an imposter. I did not grow to appreciate this film until much later in life. Looking back on it, it makes sense, right? Like, this does not have a lot of the same charms that some of the other classic Bond movies do. And that is not to this film's detriment necessarily. But I have not seen this a great deal, actually, Anton. Probably only seen this all the way through maybe 5 or 6 times.
Got it. I mean, very similarly, even as a kid, I don't think I had the best taste when it came to Bond, because even seeing On Her Majesty's Secret Service, I thought, you know what would make this film better? Jaws. Where's Jaws? All the characters should be asking whenever Jaws isn't in a scene, where's Jaws? That was just me as a kid, not knowing any better.
I'm very tempted to invite Nathan onto the Moonraker episode.
Regardless of where we get to with this film at the end, I am interested to continuing the Bond experience.
That's excellent to hear. Yeah, like I said, though, this is very much an outlier, so you're not going to get anything like this ever again. Production history.
Let's
do it. The novel On Her Majesty's Secret Service was first published after the film series started in 1962. The novel came out in 1963. Ian Fleming, who initially disliked Sean Connery's choice to play Bond, he grew to approve of the actor's performance, and he even went so far as to include Connery's Scottish heritage as part of Bond's character. Really cool anecdote. Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, the producers, They originally intended to follow the timeline in the novels, so On Her Majesty's Secret Service was supposed to take place following Thunderball. In a December 1965 interview with Playboy, Sean Connery stated that he was looking forward to a more grounded, character-driven film, but inadequate snow conditions in Switzerland caused the producers to postpone the film, and they went ahead with You Only Live Twice. Now, after You Only Live Twice was released in the summer of 1967, and Connery departed from the role, the producers once again picked up with On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Now, Anton, if you'll recall, in that episode, we talked about how the timeline from the novels had now officially been broken with You Only Live Twice.
That's right.
Peter Hunt, who had worked on the 5 preceding films as an editor, he impressed Broccoli and Saltzman enough to earn his directorial debut, as they believed his quick cutting had set the style for the series. They had previously promised him a shot at directing, and they agreed to let him do this one. Hunt later stated, quote, I wanted it to be as different from any other Bond film as it would be. It was my film, not anyone else's, end quote. Screenwriter Richard Maybaum, who had worked on all the previous Bonds except for You Only Live Twice, was the sole credited writer for this one. Maybaum and the producers decided to make it the closest adaptation of the book possible. Virtually everything in the novel occurs in the film. Hunt himself always kept a copy of the novel with him on set. Now, as for the elephant in the room replacing Sean Connery, the producers considered over 400 actors, all of whom were from the Commonwealth. They liked Oliver Reed for the role, but he was ultimately rejected due to already having a reputation. And for anyone who's not familiar with Oliver Reed, his last film role was Proximo in Gladiator. The older guy with the goatee. Am I ringing any bells here?
Yeah. And then for this film, they said, well, we can't have any goatees. That's a bad reputation.
He had a reputation for being able to outdrink Richard Burton, and that's actually ultimately what killed him during the filming of Gladiator. He went on a legendary bender and died from it.
Wow.
Yeah, I think the story goes is they were filming Gladiator in Malta, and he got into a drinking contest with a group of sailors, and he did win the contest, but he died. So I guess maybe he didn't win. Anyway, back to this film. Terrence Stamp, Supreme Chancellor Valorum.
We also know as General Zod.
That's right. Kneel before Zod. He was in the running, but he annoyed the producers with his numerous quote-unquote suggestions. I couldn't find anything else on what the suggestions were, but I'm kind of interested.
I think he also wanted more Jaws.
Who wouldn't? At one point, young Timothy Dalton was considered, but he withdrew himself from consideration as he felt that he was too young. He would have been 22 years old at the time.
So he decided to just wait it out.
Yeah.
I'll just wait 20 years.
And then I want to be in a film with Simon Pegg.
Right.
Yeah, because
he's also in an episode of The Crown, Anton. Shout out.
He's also, man, he shows up in big and small things, Timothy Dalton.
You know, he's one of the voices in Toy Story.
Is he?
Yeah, he's Ham the Pig.
No, he's not Ham the Pig.
I'm just kidding.
He is in Toy Story, though.
I was like, what?
Like, wait, what? I don't know who he voices, but he is in a couple of the Toy Stories.
I see Toy Story 3 and 4 as Mr. Pricklepants.
I don't know what that is either. I just know that he's in it.
It's the hedgehog with the green hat.
I know that we're getting really off course, but I always remember Timothy Dalton because he was in like the first season of the Doctor Who reboot, and that's like the first time I ever saw him, I think.
Oh yeah.
Anything, and then of course now I'm more familiar with him. But
he's also the villain in one of my all-time favorite movies, The Rocketeer.
Oh,
that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, great movie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind giving Timothy Dalton all this love. So
no, I like Timothy Dalton.
Yeah, big shouts out.
Yeah, we're big fans of Timothy Dalton on this podcast.
Yeah, he would ultimately not be cast in the role of James Bond until 1986. You know, when he was like 40. So he waited a while.
Yeah.
Back to this, though. So George Lazenby was eventually chosen after the producers saw him in a Fry's chocolate cream advertisement, or as the British say, advertisement. It was Lazenby's audacity that actually won him the role. He dressed for the audition by visiting the same Savile Row tailor that Connery had used and actually picking up one of Sean Connery's unused suits. The way Lazenby tells it, he strolled into Eon's offices and talked his way into the audition, impressing both producers. He sealed the deal when he accidentally punched one of the stunt people in the face during the audition. So
that sealed the deal?
Yeah. I mean, it was the 60s, Nathan. They did it differently back then.
He had moxie.
Yeah. Gumption.
You know what? I mean, I guess they were taking it as proof that he could do it in the scene, in a couple scenes later in this movie. So,
Well, it really looks like he's punching people in this movie because he really was punching people. That's what I meant when I said he really sold the action because he was doing it. And he wasn't really making anybody else on set happy, but we'll get to that. Also worth noting, Lazenby was 29 years old at the time, and to date, he is the youngest actor to ever play James Bond.
question on that, since you're a Bond fan, how old is James Bond supposed to be in the novels?
I don't know if they ever give his exact birth date, but it's suggested that he's in his like late 30s.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. Because basically, when the first novel comes out, it takes place when it was published in like 1952, and he's a World War II veteran at that point. You know, he's been in the Secret Service for a few years. He's not like a super young guy. He's a very experienced agent.
Got it.
And of course, since this was the 1960s and Lazenby smoked, he looked 40.
Just wanted to throw out there as well. This is also fair to say Bond was also depicted as 13, 14 in the Young Bond series. Just a series of it was a series of children's novels written in the 2010s.
Wait, did you ever see the Young Bond, the cartoon series?
I did not.
It's not good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's like the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles.
But you know who did enjoy it? Probably people at the Scholastic Book Fair.
Probably.
So Bridget Bardot was offered the role of Tracy, but she was unable to accept due to already agreeing to appear in Shalako with none other than Sean Connery. Diana Rigg, who was already famous for playing Emma Peel in the TV series The Avengers, was cast in the role. And as for Blofeld, Maybaum wrote the screenplay with Max von Sydow in mind for the part. Von Sydow would later play Blofeld in Never Say Never Again. And Broccoli and Saltzman decided to replace Donald Pleasance because they felt he couldn't pull off the physicality required for the part. And of course, you have to wonder if it was also for the continuity reasons. Now, Telly Savalas was cast on Broccoli's suggestion. For listeners, you may recognize Telly Savalas, of course, as the very famous Kojak. Now, Blofeld's headquarters was a partially completed restaurant on top of Mount Schulthorn. The owners allowed filming on the condition that Eon paid $125,000 and made the interior sets as a permanent fixtures and constructed a helicopter pad. It's still there to this day and a very popular tourist attraction, somewhere that we'd all like to visit someday. Now, principal photography began on October 21st, 1968 in Bern, Switzerland. The Swiss sequences ended up running 56 days over schedule, and during the shooting of one of the stunt scenes, Lazenby broke his arm, thereby delaying the filming of many of his later scenes. When James Bond is taken to Blofeld's lab at Piz Gloria, Lazenby's broken arm in its cast is hidden by his coat, which was draped over his arm. Blofeld's guard removes it from him as Lazenby was unable to do so. In March, production moved to our very favorite place, Pat.
Pinewood Studios.
You know it. For the interior scenes. And filming finally wrapped up in Portugal in May 1969. We Have All the Time in the World was the last song that Louis Armstrong ever recorded. He died less than 2 years later. It's also the first theme song in the film franchise not to include the movie's title as part of the lyrics. The motto, Orbis non sufficit, given to Bond when he researches his own coat of arms before impersonating Sir Hilary Bray, is Latin for, the world is not enough. And Ilse Stepat, who played Irma Bunt, died of a heart attack less than a week after the film's release. Pat's having fun with... Pat knows I'm having fun with these names.
Yeah. Not snow, ice.
The film had an undeserved reputation as being a box office failure, as it wasn't. It made a nice profit. That being said, it grossed 26% less than You Only Live Twice. It's quite a drop-off, nearly $400 million in today's money, and it was for this reason that the film was considered a disappointment. Contemporary reviews were pretty average, mostly centered around Lazenby's failing to replace Connery. But as was mentioned, the film's reputation has improved over time. To date, it sits at an 81% Rotten Tomatoes score. And there's a lot of pretty big names who also agree that this is quite a film. But
that's right.
Let's go ahead and dive in, gentlemen, to our first reason for why wasn't it better.
We have to start with the cast, and most notably, the star of the show, George Lazenby.
Yeah.
Because this is always going to be the biggest discussion point about this film, right? The what if here is like, well, what if Sean Connery had just done this and not Lazenby? For the record, I think Lazenby's performance in this film is acceptable. I think the screenplay is strong enough, and he is surrounded by strong enough actors, and he sells enough of the physicality of the role that he manages to get by. His performance does not ruin this film for me.
That's fair. I mean, I think that that's just great crafting by the director to just be knowledgeable of how do we work with the weaknesses of the lead.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we'll get to it in a little bit, but there were some things very much working against him. Nathan, what did you think of Lazenby having not yet seen any of the Connerys?
I felt he was inconsistent. Maybe that's the best way I can say. I don't know how much of that, and that's one of the curious things for me, is how much of that is also writing or, screen playing for it. Because sometimes it just felt like James Bond as a character just felt really like, what are you doing here? You seem a little off task. You don't seem very professional. You don't seem very consistent. And it's like, is that Lazenby's like acting, or is that the way it was written? And that was a question that I had open for a lot of this, is because he himself, I think, did a fair, for the parts that were required. I think he had the look, right? He definitely, at no point did I feel like, he doesn't really seem like James Bond or something, right? He seems, in the image in my head of James Bond, he fits it more than even maybe Daniel Craig, right? Who's like a interpretation on it, a modern interpretation, a modern reworking of it. But like, if you asked me like James Bond classic visual, like he actually, I think, fits it really well. As for his acting ability, I don't know how much it's him versus it is just sort of awkward weirdness in the script.
I think he's pretty wooden. I know what you mean. There's a lot of scenes where he has a lot of like very strange bravado.
Yeah. Now, to that extent, that's one of the things that I've actually kind of thought of for a classic kind of like Bond a little bit. So to me, coming into it, it was a little maybe expected a little bit that that's kind of what you would be getting, because it'd be more than maybe in the modern era where you'd get where I would think you would get a complicated Bond. My image was always that Bond was so self-assured, very like, oh, I'm
Yes.
totally in control. I know everything that's going on. And we'll get to it later, but there were a few moments where they weren't highlighted. Again, that's the unevenness. I feel there were a few moments where he was actually challenged to actually try acting. And I don't know if that's because the script finally said, hey, we actually need you to act in this moment versus just be James Bond. But that's a thing we can get to later.
Yeah. When you get to the Connery ones, your point is correct. Connery has, I mean, you can have, you can, obviously you'll have your own opinion on Connery. Not everybody loves Connery. Most people do, but there are some that don't. He has this unbelievable natural charisma and self-confidence and swagger that Lazenby just does not have. It really does feel like Lazenby is trying to act through it.
I
Now, that
agree.
being said, regarding to the writing, there are a handful of scenes in this film where he is deliberately written to be in very vulnerable situations that Connery's Bond was never asked to do.
I think that's a great way of describing it, Pat. I don't think any of the times where he's being bravado James Bond, I feel that it's sold. He never, I think, fits that. Even though he has the look, I don't think he ever feels it. He feels a little bit like a kid trying to be, maybe more than like owning.
Please go ahead, Nathan. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
I was gonna say, just to make another anime reference. Of course, in the anime culture, there's cosplaying. So putting on, of course, outfits, costumes of their favorite of one's favorite anime character. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought Lazenby felt like a James Bond cosplayer, where he has the look down, fantastic outfit, and able to sell like the certain high points of giving certain looks or being able to say the lines. But when it comes to things like subtlety, that's where it's night and day between the acting ability of someone like Sean Connery and then Lazenby. And that's, it's not fair, because of course it's not just Connery having all those being who he is, but also just the years of experience.
Right. I think what doesn't help Lazenby in some scenes, and it's why I'm trying to be a little bit kind to him, because he was faced with an insurmountable task of replacing Sean Connery. It would have been like in the early 1990s if someone tried to replace Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. Like, there's just, I don't know how you're going to win that. And he's put in situations where he has to act alongside Diana Rigg, who's like a Shakespearean actor, and Telly Savalas. Like, I mean, Telly Savalas, I think it's easy to goof on him, but he was an Academy Award nominated actor. Like, he was a real actor, you know what I mean? So
Oh, yeah.
no matter what situation Lazenby was going to get put in, I think he was going to get outshone by his fellow cast members. He does not have the chops for the dramatic scenes.
Yeah.
But that being said, it didn't ruin the film for me. He sold enough of the action elements. He did most of his own stunts. He's great at it. All of the fight scenes that he's in, it really looks like he knows how to fight, and that goes a long way in this kind of role.
And clearly, I feel like from a direction standpoint, they knew sometimes when to not focus on him as much or how to use him. Because you could have put him more front and center. And there's a couple places where they really should have not put him front and center, and they did. But there's a lot where I was like, oh, he's kind of taken a little bit of a backseat to kind of what else is going on, and it's working for me in a weird way where I'm like, I'm kind of happy that they're not trying to put him front and center throughout the whole thing.
Anton, do you think this would have been improved with Connery?
Yes, I do think it would have, but it would not have been the same movie.
I agree with you. The other thing, too, is I think it's tricky to answer that question, right? Because if you're telling me, could we have gotten peak Goldfinger Connery? Sure, this would be a lot better. But you have to look at where Connery was at in 1969. It would have been a pudgier Connery, a more checked out Connery.
Yeah,
we're talking Diamonds Are Forever Connery. Would Diamonds Are Forever Connery have been better in this film? Maybe.
And I'm being a bit biased because I feel like, oh yes, then we have the right charm, the charisma, the subtlety, the smirks within scenes to give exactly how we know James Bond is feeling. But what we don't get is the creativity that the director and the crew had to work with in writing the story, knowing, hey, we're working with Lazenby here. We're not working with Connery. How do we tell a story with the actors around him to improve? And what do we end up getting? We get just a lot of creativity, a great cast bringing each other up. I think we wouldn't have gotten the scene where Diana Rigg's character was driving the Aston Martin versus Bond himself.
It's great.
Mm-hmm.
The scene where she essentially rescues him at the ice skating rink, where he is completely screwed. We've never seen Bond that vulnerable before. He's totally out of moves. He looks terrified. I want to give Lazenby a lot of credit for that scene. He looks genuinely frightened and vulnerable, and it's a really interesting scene because we don't really ever see James Bond in that kind of situation until the Craig era.
And there's a lot of criticism for Lazenby and how he showed emotion in the film. A bit, some would say, too extreme. And I joked about it earlier, the polar bear jump scare.
Yes.
But you typically wouldn't expect Bond to react that way. Just like such vivid, like large-eyed reaction. I don't think I've ever seen another Bond react like that.
I was disappointed to find out that that's not his real voice when he's impersonating Hilary Bray. When I was a kid, I just thought it was him, and it's not.
No.
It's just George Baker dubbing himself. But Anton, we talked about this offline. I don't know if I texted this to you, Nathan. I hope I did because it's hilarious. During the raid on Piz Gloria, just as he's about to go down the stairs, there's a quick bit where he just lapses into Hilary Bray's voice, and he yells, "Guns make me nervous."
It's like, is it something that they had pre-recorded for a scene that was cut, but then they decided they had this voice line and they decided to throw it in there or something like that?
I don't know, but it's hilarious.
I did notice it, and there was a lot going on in that moment that I didn't really get to sit with it as much, but it definitely was like...
It's just so quick. You're like, wait, what was that? Like,
what? I was like, okay, all right. It seemed like it could be a funny quip in the moment, but especially if it's Bray's voice, it sounds like it's more something that was recorded during his impersonation sequence that then didn't get used, and they decided to recycle because they felt they needed a Bond line. Because honestly, during that whole raid up to that point, Bond, like, where the hell is Bond other than one scene where he's sliding on the ice?
Oh, it's so badass. The music's perfect. They finally dropped the Bond theme.
Oh,
It's great.
oh. Well, we'll get to the last 45 minutes in total.
Yeah.
The last like 15 minutes of this movie is like it finally decided to pick up. But
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, I want to mention it now because I think it's an interesting point. I don't want to forget it. It's like I don't think this is really an action film.
No, it's a
I think it
slice
gets
of life.
miscategorized as one. It's not really an action film.
Yeah. I was saying it's a slice of life harem anime.
Harem anime. There's a lot of anime similarities in this film, the way it's edited. We'll get to that a little bit. Back to Lazenby real quick, because I want to address this. There are some fans who really like him and who wanted to see him in more films. I am not one of them. It is clear to me that he did not have what it took for the role. I can't picture him in any of the other Bond films. I appreciate what he did in this one, but I am glad he was only in this one. There's a reason he didn't have anything resembling an acting career after this. He couldn't act. The reason why I give him a little bit of a pass, he received zero coaching on set from anyone. For as good of a job as Peter Hunt did directing the story and the action, he really let Lazenby down. He offered him no guidance, no coaching on set whatsoever. And Lazenby later admitted that he felt very isolated. I kind of feel for him in a way.
Yeah. Plus, he always has that shadow of, well, I have to step into Sean Connery's shoes. So
right.
think of that way.
There was a rumor that he and Diana Rigg did not get along on set, but Peter Hunt denies this. And for what it's worth, the producers offered him a multi-film contract.
Yeah.
But he was convinced by his agent that James Bond would become archaic in the liberated 1970s, so he turned them down.
That hippie.
Now, in hindsight, it's bad advice, but in the moment, what are the chances that a film series would last as long as Bond has?
Yeah.
It's still stupid.
Yeah. Well, I know that I was reading a little bit from him, and I'm sure there's a whole deep dive you can go into him, because I know he even did like a whole, I think, documentary about his own experience with it. And it sounds a little bit like maybe he's also tried to make peace with it in other ways of, oh, he just didn't really like it or didn't think it'd go anywhere outside of that. But still, yeah, it's surprising to think of turning down that kind of money, especially as a young guy. I mean, in some ways you may convince yourself, oh, I'll have other options.
I mean, I'm also not completely convinced of that he agreed with kind of the political standing of staying away from being Bond, because later in life he still took on more Bond-like roles.
He tried.
He tried.
Well, at some point, if that's also what you're only known for, you kind of have to make peace with, are you going to live in that or not? And at some point when you run out of money and you don't have anything, you make peace with it, I guess.
It is worth noting that his attitude on set grew tiresome. You know, he wasn't a real actor, and there was a lack of professionalism from him that really irked his castmates and the producers. You know, we talked about the hippie thing.
Yeah.
He showed up to the film's premiere with a full beard, something Broccoli and Saltzman had specifically asked him not to do, and he publicly announced that he would not be returning as 007.
Yeah, it's and not just the full beard. He'd fully grown out his hair too, so he had long hair, full beard. He's the Wolfman saying, "I'm not going to be Bond anymore." I'm sure that pissed off the Broccolis.
Rest of the cast, I think they more than make up for Lazenby's shortcomings. Diana Rigg is phenomenal as Tracy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 100%. It's a bit, I feel like this being one of the only, quote, Bond girls I've seen is really setting a high bar in terms of anything else I'm ever going to see from this franchise.
And it shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, Diana Rigg, just legend. And of course, she was in the TV series The Avengers. Today's younger viewers probably will recognize her as she played Olenna Tyrell in Game of Thrones, in which case you can see, like, even in her age, like even in her older age, she's bringing those acting chops in every scene that she's in, and she absolutely brought the thunder in this film.
She's one of the most respected performers of her generation, and this film is a great example of it, right? She's just dominating every scene she's in. You know, it's very rare for a Bond film where you get the Bond girl owning and outacting all of her peers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too because watching the film, knowing that a big part of this film is this is the woman that Bond ends up proposing to. They chose the perfect woman to capture all of the subtle qualities as well as just the emotional depth of someone that we could believe that Bond would want to propose to and marry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She,
Yeah.
both the actress and the character definitely feel a little too good for the James Bond side, at least for me.
Yeah. He didn't deserve her.
He didn't deserve her.
The other heavy hitter in this film, Telly Savalas as Blofeld. Anton, he is hands down my favorite Blofeld.
All right. Not
I
not
like
Dr.
how
Loomis?
it's not Dr. Loomis as much as I like Dr. Loomis. The reason why I'll explain. I like how hands-on he is in this film. He is an active participant. Like his counterpart in the novel, he is physically imposing. I like how Savalas plays him like a gangster. There's a charm to his character, right? He has a lot of charisma, but you can really tell the way he goes through all of his scenes. He's a complete sociopath. He does not give a crap about anything other than his own goal. He would have made a great Lex Luthor.
Yeah, I could see that, and I actually really appreciated in the film when Bond asked him, "But how are you going to take over the world with that plan?" He's like, "I'm not going to tell you."
Yeah, not going to tell you.
I appreciated that.
And one quick thing too, the reason why I put him ahead of Donald Pleasance is I think we talked about this on the Only Live Twice episode. Donald Pleasance is a real small guy, but with Savalas, you actually feel like he could fight James Bond. And of course, they they get into it on that bobsled chase, but like he actually seems like a physical match for James Bond, which is how he is described in the novels.
Well, I always thought it was not only because physically domineering, but they needed to get someone tall enough that would be caught by the branch with a bobsled, and that's why they ended up going with Savalas.
Nathan, what'd you think of Savalas as Blofeld?
Oh, I mean, on the one hand, again, being so, in some cases, more familiar with Bond through parody than through the actual, the actual series, it was fun to see in so many ways Dr. Evil on out of nowhere, and to have that. But I really liked him. Like, I thought, he's out there skiing alongside his henchmen. He's, in the bobsled doing the chase scene at the end. It is interesting. There is a context where the Bond films have a continuity, at least by context of the books, where this is not supposed to be his first rodeo. This isn't supposed to be his first introduction, where it feels there's a little bit of maybe a little bit of his story missing. But for what you get, I think is really, really good. Certainly his acting, I think, is visually, he's matching the evil mastermind very well. And he even doesn't quite get as much like a sort of cliche with it. He's actually, in many ways, kind of competent in some ways. So I think it was great.
That's why I love his performance. He's not really overacting. He's playing it pretty straight, but you can tell he was having fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the kind of campy thing that you would expect. He's still kind of it's still a bit of a goofball, like bad guy in many ways, but
his plan is goofball for sure.
Plan is goofball, and he gets led astray by the lady that's saying nice things to him, but because he's a little full of himself. But I mean, that's a normal a normal, I guess, or a standard thing to have as your weakness, right, is vanity, right? They even kind of mention it briefly in the movie.
I think it's realistic.
Yeah.
If Diana Rigg was like hitting on you, you're probably going to be like, I'll see where this goes. And we get a great
more
line
of my
from him.
pad?
Merry Christmas, 007.
Yeah.
Thus making it a Christmas film.
Very true.
The rest of the cast. Oh, go ahead.
He's what makes it Christmas. So
yeah.
You can't fault him.
There's also, I don't think I have this in the notes, but there is a Christmas song that was composed for this film and played during the Snow Village scene. The "Do You Know How Christmas Trees Are Grown?" That was written for the film. It ain't great, but
and Telly Savalas,
Telly
Savalas, he sang that, right?
yes, him and the rest of his brothers in the band. Anton, rest of the cast, I want to give a special shout out to your favorite actress, Ilse Stepat,
Yes,
as
Ilsa Steppet.
Irma Bunt. I don't think she gets enough credit, Anton. I think she
Mhm.
is arguably the coldest, most effective henchman in the entire series.
Oh yeah,
She
a
gets the
million
better
percent.
of Bond on multiple occasions. First, she surprises him in Ruby's room, which is like genuinely terrifying.
Yeah.
It briefly turns into Fatal Attraction, and she's the one who fires the fatal shots to kill Tracy. Like, has there ever been a henchman in the entire series this effective?
No, and it's amazing how well her character was able to just be believable too, and just like how cunning and how cruel she was. So again, yeah, I agree. Shouts out to Irma Bunt's actress,
Whatever her name is. No, Ilse Stepat. No,
Elsa
because
Steppet.
she does a good job too. Because the second you see her at the train station when she and her men are waiting for Bond to arrive, you kind of get the sense. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, Nathan. You're like, this lady's going to be a problem.
Oh, yeah. Again, a classic character that has been parodied multiple times, right? You're like,
Yes,
immediately you see it.
Frau
and you're like,
Verbissina.
yeah, exactly.
Frau.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally calling her Frau. It's like, oh, yep, this is what's amazing is looking up that this is the only movie that the character's in. Is that it's like amazing that it's kind of funny looking at this movie and the history of, or the impact of this movie overall, and how many things at least I can point to as being like, I've seen that parodied, I've seen that used, I've seen that used. So even thinking of like a single henchman character persisting this long, I think is a testament exactly to both the acting and the character's impact in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think my favorite character in the film, Draco, played by Gabriele Ferzetti.
Draco's the homie. That's all I can say.
I love this guy. He's one of the best allies in the series. Real charming guy, real personality. He has a real character arc. He has, I think clearly established, if misguided motivations. He's trying to pimp out his daughter, essentially. But his heart's in the right place,
Yeah, and very, very generous guy at the end of the day.
He is. Also, how comfy is his office? Did we take time to notice that?
He has so many nice things. We could just appreciate all his nice things.
Honestly, this film, I appreciate this film for so many different reasons. One of which is the production design. I think if I could have any room in any film ever, it might be his office with the fireplace, and he's got like a little it looks like a little area for him to nap, and there's just he has a desk, and there's sitting chairs, and there's a dartboard. It's just like there's a mini bar. It's like, what else do you need?
I really like that scene actually in general, for not something related to the production. It is a comfy office. It's awkward. Where was it found? It's like he has to go underground or something to get to the office.
I don't know where it's located, but it's basically in a port at like some shipping. They're basically at the shipyards. So I'm assuming it's like underground at some shipyard office.
Right. That I remember that scene actually for something in terms of a directorial choice that I really liked. And I don't know where else to stick this into the podcast, so I'll mention it. I really liked how part of the when Bond throws like the knife, it's out of focus, and then it's when he puts on the glasses, it comes into focus, and then he takes off the glasses and it goes back out of focus. It's a fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
That's some anime stuff. Yeah. That's like something you'd see in anime.
In a slice of life anime, yes.
I'm not going to back off this, Anton.
I agree.
I'm going to die on this hill.
I like it. I did want to add one more thing in terms of this is a great cast around Lazenby, right? Interestingly enough, what was absent was the usual crew that we would see as a staple in other Bond films make a very, very small appearance, right? You don't get much of Q, you don't get much of Moneypenny.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point for Nathan too. If he's going to watch more of these, you'll see far more of Q and M and Moneypenny in other Bond movies.
Which just shows how unconventional this film was.
Yeah, that was something that I kind of noticed, I would say, because I was expecting more of them, and which is where it was interesting as I was watching, or I was thinking about that context.
Something I didn't notice until like the fourth or fifth rewatch, that the crew that we're just talking about, they essentially get replaced by Draco's crew. I don't know if you noticed this, but his men, he has like a core team of like 5 or 6 guys.
Yeah.
They are present throughout the whole film. They are the guys on the beach in the beginning.
Mhm.
They are the guys who basically kidnap Bond in Portugal and bring him to Draco's office. They are the guys at the raid on Piz Gloria with the helicopters. They're all there for that. And they're there at the wedding at the end.
Yeah, yeah. I had that as a note as well of something that I thought was actually a fun thing is like, wow, there's quite a bit of like actual continuity with these guys throughout the film, showing up.
Draco is a character I wish we had seen again in the series. Him and Tiger Tanaka, Anton. They are the two guys who, if you could choose any two characters from a film and drop them into another one, I wish we had gotten either of them.
Very well written characters, and genuinely, they seem like two dudes that would be cool to hang out with.
Yeah. Well, they live well.
Yeah.
They live well. I gotta say, his lady friend, she makes a martini in record time.
It's almost as if they had it off screen.
Yeah. It's almost as if they were expecting him. He's like, go kidnap Mr. Bond. Have the martini ready. And he also drinks straight Campari, which is, that's a choice.
Didn't they say didn't Bond say he usually drinks something else and then he has
Corsican brandy.
Oh, Corsican brandy, yeah.
That's the stuff where it's just so well written. That's just great dialogue.
Yeah, that's what helps make it a believable world, right? That these guys already kind of know about each other. They're existing in that Bond universe, right? They like get intel briefs and they know, even if they've never actually met each other.
It's great world building, you're right. I'm glad you called that out. It reminds me, did you catch this at the end at the wedding when Draco is talking to M?
Yes.
And they're both off the clock, and M is congratulating him for the November 1964 bullion job.
Yeah, and
That's great stuff.
You cost me 3 of my best operators, and he's like,
yeah, it's
you got away with a bit of money at the bullion job. Yeah,
great stuff. Let's move on to the plot, which is our next reason. So this is the other big question about this movie, and Nathan, this will make more sense when you watch some of the older ones.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are always wondering, why don't Bond and Blofeld recognize each other if this takes place after You Only Live Twice? Now, Eon has never officially addressed this storytelling inconsistency. There's a lot of theories on this, Anton, that you can look up online. Frankly, I've never understood any of them. I think this is a very clear explanation. This is clearly following the timeline from the novels. It is obviously supposed to take place after Thunderball, and it ignores the events of You Only Live Twice.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's no other logical explanation.
It's that's the most logical explanation, but just another element that, I learned about in a previous recording is in the novels, Blofeld, his character is known to have repeated surgeries, right?
I don't know about surgery. He is constantly gaining and losing weight and wearing wigs and stuff to disguise his appearance.
Right.
But that still doesn't explain how he would not recognize Bond.
Yep. No.
Now, I read this on IMDb, so take this with a grain of salt. The producers originally intended to explain the change in lead actors by saying that Bond had undergone plastic surgery because his old face was now too well known, so he couldn't be able to go undercover. But they decided not to refer to the change at all, and thus hopefully minimize the public's attention being paid to Lazenby replacing Connery. But however, as the opening pre-title sequence ends, Bond says directly to the camera, "This never happened to the other fella," an intentionally comedic reference to the change in actors.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I laughed when I saw that, because going into the movie, that's even without ever seeing the Connery stuff, like that's at the forefront of my mind, and I'm like, wow, that's really on the nose.
Too much. As far as the plot goes, I think just remember this. When Bond finally sets eyes on Blofeld in this film, he still isn't sure if it's him or not. Going by what we know from the novels, he had a rough physical description of the man, but Blofeld was constantly altering his appearance like we talked about, Anton.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sure you've also heard the theory that Blofeld is actually the cat.
Of course.
That's a theory.
Could be.
Yeah, it's there in the theory iceberg for James Bond. It's deep in the iceberg.
It's deep.
Now, it's not explicitly explained in this film. But the reason Blofeld is so hands-on in this one is that after the events of Thunderball, Spectre is very much on the run. To borrow a term from The Godfather, they've gone to the mattresses. They're trying to keep the lowest possible profile, and that's why we see a much more scaled down of Spectre than what we saw him before, right?
Sure, that's keeping a low profile. Yeah.
It is.
This plot is keeping a low profile.
Oh, let's talk about it, their plot.
It's elaborate.
It's bananas. It's arguably more ludicrous than a plan to involve a secret hollowed out volcano lair, which doesn't make sense, but also kind of does. But again, I will give this slightly a pass because it was faithful to the novel. They were just adapting the plot in the novel.
I was gonna say, to be fair, they could have come up with a very elaborate and confusing diamond smuggling ring.
I can't wait to hear Nathan's thoughts on Diamonds Are Forever when he gets around to it.
Because, yeah, Nathan, after you get this film, you think this is a confusing plot.
Oh, this is child's play.
Oh, Diamonds Are Forever. Mental gymnastics.
Okay. This one definitely left me like, I very much was like, I'm not going to hold this film to the villain's plot. Like, I'm not going to hold too much of a microscope to that, because it's clear that this is not thought out or consistent in any
Not
way
at all.
and that the point is not the villain. The point is that the villain has a plot that seems to be effective, and everyone capitulates to him in the end, except for James Bond. That's the point. Whatever the actual mechanics of it are, I mean, it's also an excuse for James Bond to be in a building full of ladies, but that's a different story.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into this plot, because I too have questions. First of all, isn't he calling attention to himself by attempting this? He's not even asking for money. He wants amnesty for all his past crimes, and he wants to be recognized as the Comte de Blochamp.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does that even work?
Well,
How does that stop the authorities from just arresting him or killing him?
I mean, maybe if he was doing something valuable, like turning in Draco or something like that. Oh, I had deals with all these other crime syndicates. Here's all their info. Can you give me amnesty or something like that? Of course, that doesn't make for a plot like this film has, but like, that at least is a bargaining chip that's somewhat could be realistic if you're just going for amnesty. But this feels like, exactly a Dr. Evil, like, we're going to hold the world hostage kind of thing.
But at least in Thunderball, Anton, they actually had nukes, which made a lot more sense.
Yeah, pretty clear what the stakes were.
Yeah, like Nathan, in the plot of Thunderball,
Mhm.
they hijack nuclear weapons and hold them for ransom for like $100 million, which was a lot of money then and now, but a lot more then. It's like, that makes a lot more sense than this.
Oh,
In
this one makes sense if you don't think about it at all. If you
Right.
take it at the most base level with no details at all, it's Blofeld has the ability to destroy all crops and livestock on the planet whenever he wants, and he's going to hold the world hostage.
Which
And
sounds serious.
sounds serious, and the people and his way of doing it is triggering agents that are untraceable, and he just needs to give one verbal command and the agents.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Okay, okay, all right. Oh, yeah, okay.
Again, if you strip out the
I'm
what the
sorry.
hell is actually going on with the specifics, if I give you that is scary and intimidating, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Sure.
Like, I can at a
My wife asked this when we were watching. She's like, so is he just going to use the hypnotized models forever? I'm like, yeah, I guess. Doesn't seem sustainable, but
I will say one of the biggest plot holes is at the end of this, like, they didn't disarm any of the models, as far as I can tell. I don't understand what he sent all the off with the thing that is again, they didn't explain all of it, so I don't know. But it seemed like all the models were sent off. The allergy vaccine that's in can be activated to kill whatever livestock their allergy was fixed for, or whatever plant their allergy was fixed for, is the impression that I get.
right. It is real quick when he is shortly before the compound gets destroyed, the base gets destroyed. Bond takes pictures of the map with all the models' pictures on it, so it's implied that they caught them all. But
Got it.
To your point, they don't show it. It's ridiculous.
Because I'm like, if they're still out there somewhere, they didn't catch all of them. It's like, that's a nuke of a kind. In some ways, maybe more dangerous. That's like walking
Yeah, like,
around.
what if one of them drops it and like breaks
Well-
accidentally?
No, they won't drop it. They're models. They're
Oh my God.
they're supermodels.
Let's talk about the Angels of Death.
Do we have to?
We do. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I want to clown on this too.
Okay. All right.
And this is the logic part of the plot where it just really falls apart. Why would Spectre go to all the trouble of brainwashing these supermodels to spread the virus? They could just use Spectre agents.
They could.
Well,
Think about it. Blofeld could use anyone, anywhere, at any time. This is needlessly complicated.
The question is, why did they use female models when, if we went like Zoolander logic, he should have used male models?
Right?
why models?
I mean, we needed women for James Bond to have sex with.
It would have been awkward if it was guys, right?
Did
Yeah.
Diana Rigg's character prove it with how she was able to disarm Blofeld? That having a supermodel being able to infiltrate any building in the world just by using their charm would be enough of a skill?
No,
It's very possible.
that wasn't her plan. I don't think that
No,
was her
but
plan or setup.
Did either of you notice what the Angels were eating at dinner?
Yeah, they were eating all the foods that they were supposed to be like cured of allergy from.
Yeah, but I mean, more specifically, it's possibly the most racist thing in the entire series.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the Chinese woman is eating rice. The like
Yep.
Irish
Yeah.
woman is eating potatoes or something like that. Like it's I just
The African woman is eating a banana. It's awful. It's ridiculous.
oh my god.
I hope people don't look at me a different way if I'm just eating rice at the table while everyone else is eating something else.
Well,
I just
everybody
want
eats rice. I mean,
exactly.
Also, I really it's uncomfortable how they act just in general toward
What do you mean, just throwing themselves at Bond?
not only throwing themselves at Bond, but also the almost like young, like not young, like, oh, I'm a like ditzy young girl, but almost to the point of like I get a weird, almost like child thing going on from them that is like really uncomfortable for me. And the most off-putting thing because they keep like asked, oh, do you have the book with the pictures? I want to see the picture book. And I'm just like,
Nathan's just watching this thing. These women are getting exploited.
Nathan, they've been cooped up there for months. Like we know what's going on here. You know what it reminded me of? The Family Guy bit where Stewie has the sexy party.
Yeah, and Stewie loves his sexy parties.
Yeah, where he's dressed up as like a captain or something like that.
And we've mentioned it before. This is a slice of life harem anime.
Since you've been here, I taught you to love chicken.
To that extent, I will agree, Anton. That is a slice of life harem anime to a T. Except that Bond is getting a lot more action than he should if it was a true slice of life harem anime.
That's right.
Yeah, he can't keep it in his pants or his kilt.
It's
pretty reckless on his part. All he had to do was just not try to have sex with any of them.
I actually really did love it. I mean, we talked about it already when
I love it too.
Well, sorry. I loved it when he went into the room and it was just Irma Bunt in the bed. It was literally, it was terrifying.
It's genuinely freaky. Like,
yeah.
It's also
and I don't know if you caught this. There's a really when he gets knocked out, it's in slow motion, and slow motion would have been brand new at movies at the time. Pretty cool. I mean, not really cool, but interesting.
He wakes up to Blofeld.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, 007.
There were a couple bits like that slow-mo where you could tell they're actually doing some new things in terms of film in it. And I think this may go to kind of Pat, a lot of your some of your comments about editing. Definitely felt things that even today we'd feel is a little modern.
Yeah. They were getting experimental with it.
Yeah.
I actually misremembered something about the plot. I thought that he got caught by Blofeld because he was in one of the girls' rooms, and I guess that didn't help him. But I always forget that he makes a mistake about where the Beauchamp's tombs are located.
Mm-hmm.
And Blofeld's like, you're not actually a rich guy.
He just switches back to his normal voice too. That's the real acting performance.
On that note, it's such, I mean, literally the plot like doesn't move forward until it's like crucial to the plot moving forward. Why does Blofeld care about being a count? Is it just meant to add to his character of like he's a little full of himself?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah, he's a total egomaniac.
He wants to be a vampire.
Yeah, it's his plot really it does not hold up to scrutiny.
It seems like such a interesting thing. I think ultimately I kind of like the premise of James Bond has to become Clark Kent and be this kind of goofball who's like going to talk about like genealogy for 5 hours or something like that, as being like he's not undercover. He's undercover as kind of something a little different, or as kind of more of a goofball or an aloof, or like trying to be this like maybe even very like not into the ladies kind of guy, because the girls keep referencing all the time like, oh, you were really playing up not being into us or something like that. Like, oh my, are you just supposed to? Do you expect that any man that would see you would immediately be like doing the cartoon wolf thing, like a Looney Tunes, like Auga?
He wasn't thinking about Tracy, was he?
No, he was nope, which was a whole other thing in terms of if that's faithful to the books. I don't know what's kind of going on with that.
It is. It is.
Definitely inconsistent and makes anything later between him and Tracy always kind of feel weird, even when it's trying to be like legitimate. Like,
yeah, that's a good way to put
if
it.
you could cut out that part or change it, I think it would have so much of just the plot, even if it's goofy. Like, if you change the Angels of Death thing, I think you could even still keep the funny kind of genealogy, like, oh, I'm really, guns make me nervous thing, and like actually do that in a fun way, and also not have it feel like it invalidates what's trying to be a love story, a romantic story in it later, with him being like such a sleazebag. Oh my god, him with the Playboy in, like, what is he even doing in the lawyer's office? Like, he just sits there and starts reading the Playboy. Like, I don't know, he's
pretty weird.
He's asleep.
Yeah, we do get a cool copy machine though, the portable copy machine. I agree with you. The Piz Gloria stuff is the weak link in the film for me.
Yeah.
What I think would have improved it is take out some of the stuff with the angels and give him more scenes with Blofeld. Like, imagine if there had been a scene where he's talking about the genealogy stuff with Blofeld and he starts to doubt whether or not this is Blofeld. That would have been way more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where he's just thinking to himself, like, what if this guy really isn't Blofeld? What if this guy is just this allergy doctor who wants to be a count? How do I know? How do I prove this?
And that's when he banged all of the harem of women.
Right. Because he's got that'll be your best lead for information, is all of the women who are meant to be airheads and like don't know anything. Way to think with your head.
Look, the real heroic effort would have been trying to seduce Fraulein Bunt.
Hey man,
but thankfully we don't get that.
A modern Bond would do that.
Anton, I'm going to change the subject. This one's for you. I have a bit of trivia for you.
Here we go.
So Bond's courtship of Tracy, as well as the mountain setting for much of the action, it inspired elements of the first appearance of Ra's al Ghul in the Batman comics, called Daughter of the Demon, from Batman number 232 in 1971. Ra's al Ghul kidnaps Robin to force Batman to help rescue his daughter Talia from kidnappers. The story's climax features a chase in the snow similar to what we see on Her Majesty's Secret Service, albeit with the action in the Himalayas as opposed to the Alps. I thought you'd appreciate that.
Do appreciate that. Can definitely see the parallels there.
Yeah. It's time to talk about the ending. Best in the series?
The most emotional ending. I think a lot. I've seen it a lot, and we've talked about it before. It makes it a very complete film.
Shocking.
Oh.
There's nothing else like it in the series.
Super unexpected.
Nathan, were you genuinely shocked by the ending?
I was surprised. So I'll say this: I was expecting it. I was thinking it because I know, again, from Bond parodies that that's like a thing that happens, is like Bond gets married, but the lady dies. I didn't expect it to be the closing scene of this movie. I figured that's something that's kept for either off screen or the beginning of another movie, not like the full arc for this one. And I also didn't expect it to be, again, Lazenby's not the most amazing actor, but even I can feel something when that's like the end and he's like, saying we have all the time in the world. Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
The universe can be a cold place sometimes.
Yeah.
It's one of the coldest endings I've ever seen in any film, ever.
And I mean,
Yeah.
especially when we think of how No Time to Die ended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, but so much more emotional weight with this scene. If they
Yeah.
were trying to go for emotional weight with the ending, you know what I
There's
mean?
no build up to it either. It just comes out of nowhere. You're like, oh, Blofeld's driving the car with a neck brace on. And she's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Anton, I'd say if there's one thing the series really messed up, it's that we never got a proper conclusion to this story. We never got to see Bond's revenge on Blofeld that we got in the novel. They sort of try to conclude this with Fear Eyes only, but I don't think that counts in my opinion because it's handled like a parody.
For the longest time, too, they never allowed Bond to get this emotionally attached to any woman until the Craig films with Vesper, and that was a very pivotal part of the Daniel Craig films was Bond's love for Vesper. But all the way back to On Her Majesty's Secret Service, like you could say this is where it all started, that emotional depth of Bond.
Yeah. Don't let anyone fool you. Diamonds Are Forever is not a continuation of this film's story.
It is not.
No.
So, Pat, you mentioned that the books continue this.
Yes.
In terms of it being an emotional weight and an emotional trigger for Bond through, like a driving factor for him through the story.
Very much so. So Blofeld only appears in 3 of the novels. Thunderball, this one, and You Only Live Twice. Now, for reasons that aren't really that clear, they decided to just go off the rails with You Only Live Twice and adapt it kind of like its own thing. It came out before this. They changed the continuity. In the novel You Only Live Twice, Bond, wanting to avenge Tracy, he tracks Blofeld down to Japan and he kills Blofeld and Irma Bunt with his bare hands, strangles them both to death. So there is a conclusion to it in the novels, and for what it's worth, I actually don't really care for that novel. But yeah, it is concluded in the novels, and we never get that in the films. So what you see at the end of this film, Nathan, is never concluded.
Disappointing, but in a way adds to kind of what then becomes kind of the idea of a Bond movie and Bond as a character, maybe.
Right. Yeah, this was certainly a deviation from the formula that they had established over the past 5 films. Although I might, maybe, because it's tough to say, right? Because the first 4 films, Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, they're all pretty faithful to the novels. And You Only Live Twice is where it just completely goes off a cliff. They make an attempt here to bring it back to the novels, and then they go off the rails again with Diamonds Are Forever, and they never look back. But I don't know. I'm kind of glad with what we got. I really like this film. I appreciate it for what it is, and I appreciate the ones that came after it too. So, guys, let's talk about the production. Nathan, what did you think of the score?
I mean, it's great. I mean, it's such a classic, even without having really watched them, it's hard to not know the Bond themes. And when they hit, man, do they hit. Like, I think the one that was unexpected that was used throughout basically the action sequences through the last kind of 45 minutes, the ski chase music,
oh yeah,
through a number of different things, is the unexpected one that really was like, oh, I mean, as I'll probably repeat later, like the last 45 minutes of this movie is when it finally like slotted in for me and was like, it's on. Like this movie's now happened, and was really great, right? And part of that was the score finally kind of deciding it wanted to wake up and start moving.
I think it's John Barry's crowning achievement. Best score in the series, one of my all-time favorite film scores. I think it's marvelous. I'm not sure how it wasn't nominated for an Academy Award, if not outright should have won. Barry pulls out all the stops for this. It really feels like he gave this something extra, Anton.
Absolutely, and very influential, right?
Yeah, you hear this Her Majesty's Secret Service theme all over the place. It was very famously used in the teaser trailer for The Incredibles back in the day.
Mm.
That French horn. That's the theme that you hear during the ski chase, Nathan.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Yeah.
Unbelievable. He has a nice quote too. He opted to use more electrical instruments and a more aggressive sound in the music for this one. He said, "quote I had to stick my oar in the musical area double strong to make the audience try and forget they don't have Sean to be Bondian beyond Bondian." End quote.
Hmm.
You get the nice Moog synths in the title, the instrumental title song. Perfect. That ski chase music is on my workout playlist.
So, a question I have, because I'm not familiar with the Connery Bond films. So, like, how much at this point, what was being reused from the previous films because it was already the Bond music versus what was new stuff?
So everything except you know the James Bond theme, of course.
Hmm.
That is the only thing that was in the older films. Each film has a pretty unique score.
Okay.
Barry did the music to all the previous films up until this one.
Okay.
So what he did really well is he would incorporate the title songs into the score. So each one has a really unique feel. Goldfinger has this more jazzy big brass sound. Thunderball has much more of a chill, relaxed vibe because it takes
Mhm.
place in the Bahamas. You Only Live Twice has a Japanese element to it.
Grandiose.
Yes, yes. And then this one, this is my favorite one. It's just, there's so many different themes in here. The music that plays when he's trying to crack the lawyer's safe when he's reading the Playboy.
Yeah.
Just really good use of synths. All the ski stuff, all the stuff. There's tracks called Dusk at Piz Gloria. It's haunting. Bond
Mhm.
settles in. It has this real foreboding. It's a real complete score. It's available on Spotify and anywhere. I think it's like a solid almost 2 hours of music too. It's a really complete score. It's wonderful. It's my favorite thing about the film. And then the non-title song, We Have All the Time in the World. I think it's one of the best of the series. It's very highly regarded by fans. The melody is used wonderfully throughout the film. It's a very romantic melody, and there's a reason why Hans Zimmer used that melody again when he scored No Time to Die, because it's so iconic. Best thing about the score too, he only drops the James Bond theme once in this whole film, and it's
Mhm.
during the raid on Piz Gloria when it's perfect. Any thoughts on the score before we move on, gentlemen?
Just we touched on No Time to Die, and I think that it's very clear, if listeners didn't get it, that John Barry is a legend. And so to be able to see this in the film with just such an iconic score, and again, a very unconventional opening theme, just goes to show how unique of a film this is. There was a lot of really amazing strengths for the film, despite a very unconventional nature.
Well, Lazenby wasn't the only person making their debut. Peter Hunt, we talked about him. This was his first attempt at directing. He had edited the previous 4 films. I think he did a tremendous job here making his mark. He wanted to remain faithful to the novel and keep things grounded. I think with the exception of Blofeld's just ludicrous plot, this is a pretty grounded film, and it has a very unique look and feel to it. Thematically, it is definitely a continuation of Thunderball, but it is filmed differently. We had a new director of photography on this one as well, Michael Reed.
Hmm.
I will say though, it's what's nice is even though we had a bit of a shift with director of photography and director, we still do get a lot of sweeping shots that I think do a great job of capturing like the scale of the scenery, the scale of the world that we're in.
Yeah, definitely. They make tremendous use of the locations where they're shooting. That's always been something that the Bond series did well, especially back then. The way that the action is filmed and edited, a lot of stuff is undercranked. There's smash zooms and flash cuts. That's the stuff that reminded me of anime. I'm not super familiar with action films of the 1960s. I've seen, the major ones. None of them really look like this.
Much wider, more open kind of sequences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like a lot of the camera angles and shots in here, they could be animated panels. It's a very unique looking film for its era.
Using the cuts to increase the momentum and the pacing of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
And I think it's not always done perfectly. Like Nathan, you were talking about the pre-title sequence earlier. That's the worst example of it, I think.
Yeah.
But I think, like, for example, when he fights the guy in his hotel room and then like the ski chase and the raid on Piz Gloria, that's where it shines.
Well, I think it's best when the action is a little bit higher. I would say maybe some of that editing didn't work as much in the fight in the hotel room, contrasting with I think maybe the best use of it is actually the crowd scene after he gets down the mountain, because
Oh yeah.
it builds so much that sense of foreboding. Like, I don't, Bond is scared. Bond is uncertain. They're right on his heels. It's cutting between the bad guys, Bond. They don't know where he is. He doesn't know where they are. He's on the run. Like, works so well. The raid, it gives it this frantic, very action vibe. I mean, it's so interesting, I think, because you have a big swath of the film that is slow, that and intentionally by the plot standpoint, it's much slower. And then you get these, especially towards the end, like the action just picks up, and a lot of that editing and camera work, I think, just works so well. The skiing sequence, great. You're getting all these shifts and everything. Super. Keeps that momentum, keeps that action. Love it.
Yeah, that's a really good call out about the scene in the snow village.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great use of building tension.
Yeah.
You're just really not sure how he's going to get out of this.
Yeah. And you can see he's not, and this goes to the acting bit, you're not sure because it's clear he's not sure how he's getting out of this. Right? There was almost a moment where I realized, wait, he's panicking. Wait, Bond is panicking? Bond doesn't know how to get out of this? He's not already 5 steps ahead? And that was cool, right? And then really adds to when Tracy shows up at the end, and you're like, yes, to keep the anime trope going, best girl is here. And we're finally getting this back on track.
I think my favorite part of the whole film is the ski chase. Talk about real tension. The way it's shot, the way it's scored, it's just perfection for me.
Beautifully shot.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think my new worst fear is like thugs on with guns on skis, because they're going fast. And
yeah,
you know what? Those guys carrying a gun instead of ski poles, man, you know what?
Bold.
Bold. Props to them. And to actually shoot with the thing, that's, there's some accomplished skiers apparently up on the Inspector.
I was also thinking about this too on the latest rewatch. It's also a perfect example of an action sequence working for the plot rather than the other way around. Like, it makes perfect sense that he would escape from there on skis.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just say like, Anton, we're not going to get to the world is not enough for a while. But I don't know if you remember, they just shoehorn a ski chase into the film because they clearly just wanted to put a ski chase in the film.
Yeah, it was also the hardest level in the PS1 game was the ski chase scene.
With the Parahawks.
It was really hard.
And we'll get to that movie. And when we do, I'm going to go after that ski chase scene because it doesn't, not only does it not make sense for the plot, it works against the plot.
Is that the one where, and I know we're not talking about that movie, but is it the one where he does have the parachute with the Union Jack?
No, that's The Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh, okay. My bad. I was missing.
But good guess. No, World's Not Enough is Pierce Brosnan.
Okay.
It was also a Christmas film.
Was it?
It sure was.
Man.
We're not going to elaborate that on Nathan. We're going to let you discover that one for yourself.
Okay. Man, I didn't realize there was such a connection between Christmas and James Bond, but I like it.
There's a very intimate connection.
I'm very excited when you watch that film, and let us know when you do.
Yeah, let us know. We expect your book report on it later.
Oh, okay. All right.
We talked about the helicopter raid. That's, again, one of my favorites in the series. For the cinematography, Hunt aimed for a, quote, simple but glamorous, like the 1950s Hollywood films I grew up with, end quote, as well as something realistic, quote, where the sets don't look like sets, end quote. Yeah, great, just a great Technicolor film. All the colors really pop. I mentioned the slow motion earlier. There's also a couple other firsts for the series, Anton. First Bond film to use flashbacks, where Bond remembers Tracy getting captured.
Interesting.
Briefly. Yeah. And then, of course, breaking the fourth wall when Lazenby looks into the camera and says this never happened to the other fella.
That was that was a bit cheesy.
Pretty stupid.
Do you mean?
I mean, that whole opening part was a bit cheesy.
I mean, I thought for me, it was it was a little. It started really weird. Like, I was now following this lady and just watching her through a spyglass. But I guess that's what you do when you're Bond. But I guess
I just saw it as cheesy just because they're really hamming it up. Like, who's this Bond? Is this who we think it is? We're gonna show his hands, but not his face.
They don't. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Oh, totally. That is a big part of it. It's like you don't see Bond. You don't really. He only says his name, and then he's in a fight, and you don't really get to focus on him and what it looks like and everything.
And then it's the guy from the chocolate commercial.
Yeah, you didn't expect him.
Pretty long movie.
Yes. Yes. I did not realize it was clocking in at, 2 hours, 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's paced pretty well, but there are some slow parts for sure.
Yeah.
This has some of my favorite locations of any film. It's entirely set in Europe. It's entirely filmed in Europe. All these places you can actually visit. So, Anton, that casino on the Portuguese coast, it's still there. It looks identical to how it did in 1969. There's basically been no changes.
Oh, and it's
You
still
can stay
operating?
at that hotel. Yeah.
Really? Interesting.
Yeah, yep. It's the only time in the series we get to see Bond's office where it isn't a virtual reality program.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that scene where he toasts the picture of the Queen. Sorry, Mom. Anton, what did you feel about seeing M's home, quarterdeck?
It's again another really cool thing about the film, things that we haven't seen before. So pretty
Yeah,
neat.
and all the stuff in Switzerland is if I could pick any Bond location to visit in real life, I think it would be that.
I think it's something that it's really sticking with me is, yes, the on-set location filming is amazing. They really captured the beauty of it. But then I keep thinking to myself, what part was Pinewood Studios? And they did a really good job.
They did. All the sets in here are pretty cool. Right, it's pretty seamless. Overall, other than the Highland attire that he wears to dinner, I really liked his wardrobe in here.
Yeah.
He's got some really modern looking suits.
Right.
We get a navy herringbone suit, navy chalk stripe. We get Glen check that he wears to the lawyer's office. We get a cream suit in Portugal. A cream suit's really hard to pull off. We get that golf suit, which is kind of funny. The Christmas cardigan. All that stuff's pretty timeless, minus the kilt. Although, you can pull it off if you're Scottish. Yeah.
I mean, it was very clear. I mean, talking about Austin Powers.
Yeah.
The frilly shirt.
Frilly shirt.
Yeah, the frilly shirt.
Much.
Yeah.
I was like, is he trying to be a pirate? I also thought Seinfeld.
The puffy shirt.
Puffy shirt, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see some outfits that work well, but are definitely part of their time, right? Like what he changes into before he goes on this skiing is definitely something that feels like that's very era appropriate, maybe.
Yes.
But definitely like worked for what was going on and felt very kind of Bond, the image that I had for Bond in that time and frame of time.
And then we get what I think is the best Aston Martin in the series. I like it better than the DB5 from Goldfinger. The Aston Martin in this film is one of the coolest cars ever made, in my opinion. Looks like an old muscle car.
It definitely was pretty badass, but I don't know. I do feel like I lean more towards the DB5.
Have you ever seen one up close?
I've not.
They are a lot smaller than you'd think.
Well, I mean, as long as you can fit the machine guns in, you're fine.
Ejector sheet? You must be joking.
Yeah, it's compact and it's efficient.
It is.
You have to have enough space so that way Q is able to be efficient with fitting in as many gadgets into the DB5. So you got to have the machine guns, probably something to let out the smoke. How about let's throw in something that can like spill oil onto any cars behind you.
You need an ice box so you can chill your champagne with 2 glasses.
Exactly. Removable hood.
Right. I guess that's one of the disappointments in this one. It's like he had the only Aston Martin that wasn't bulletproof. Like poor Tracy.
Oh, dang. See? Oh, man. If only it was the DB5.
Too soon?
I just watched the scene right before we filmed this, so it feels a little.
Yeah.
Oof.
Nathan's like, damn, man. Like,
compare it to No Time to Die, where literally there's an entire what felt like 5-minute scene where Bond's driving in circles while the car's getting shot at.
I have some quotes from some filmmakers here regarding this film and how much they like it. So I thought these were interesting because you normally don't get guys like Steven Soderbergh commenting on James Bond. He said, quote, "For me, there's no question that cinematically On Her Majesty's Secret Service is the best Bond film and the only one worth watching repeatedly for reasons other than pure entertainment. Shot to shot, this movie is beautiful in a way none of the other Bond films are," end quote. I don't know if I agree with that completely, but I like that he liked.
Yeah, and it goes to show where we see the appreciation for this, and I think it's just a nice parallel that taste can change over time, and there is an appreciation for the unconventional when you move away from the formula. So, speaking of filmmakers, recent Academy Award winner Christopher Nolan, he also stated on Her Majesty's Secret Service, it's his favorite Bond film. And describing its influence on the film Inception, he said, quote, "What I liked about it that we've tried to emulate in this film is there's a tremendous balance in that movie of action and scale and romanticism and tragedy and emotion, end quote. Christopher Nolan, of course, has not been shy to share his love for Bond films, and it'd be amazing to see him at the helm of maybe directing one someday. But goes to show you a bit of an idea of, one, what he appreciated about this film, and also just a parallel to what he appreciates in his own directing. So, two very famous filmmakers that really do love this film.
I love it. Well, this has been a tremendous discussion. I think it is time to wrap it up and give our ratings. Nathan, unless you have anything else to add, would you like to go first as our guest?
Oh, sure. So this film, man, it is interesting. It's my first classic Bond film. It comes with some weight, but also was a movie that I was in some ways able to enter without as much baggage. I know a big part of going into this movie for people is for both at that time, and then I know for you guys as well, is going from Connery to Lazenby, right? It's a big part of it. That said, I didn't have that same kind of baggage, but can still see the kind of where there's some parts missing. One thing I don't think I got to speak as much about, but I had a really tough time with the first 2/3 of this movie, first half, 2/3 of this movie. It felt slow. It felt there wasn't enough action. I think through this discussion, I've gained a greater appreciation that it's doing something different compared to other Bond films, but that kind of only comes out when you have other Bond films to give as reference. Otherwise, it feels a little, for me, felt a little awkward, a little bit like, what's this James Bond kind of doing? Is he really kind of this spy? He's not really doing action things. He's kind of around. There's this kind of romantic subplot, but he's also still hitting on every single lady he's seeing. This movie was greatly improved in the last 45 minutes for me, I will say. I was pretty ready to give this like a C, I think, in terms of a scale for me up until that point, up until the ski scene and everything falling out from there. It's still a little hard, and I think I'm going to need to watch some other Bond movies, and with that context, we'll have to go back and reappreciate this. For me, it's going to land at this time as a B for me. I think that action hitting, the music hitting, Tracy coming out at that last 45 minutes, it's hard to forgive the movie. It's hard to forgive the ladies and every Bond being kind of weird and scummy up until that point. But once that hit, it's like, I want to see that. I want to see the movie where it starts in him going to, like, the movie starts in Piz Gloria, like it's already like in motion, and it goes from there, and it doesn't have a lot of kind of iffiness in terms of him and his relationship with Tracy, and I think this would be like amazing. But because of that, I'm going to give it a B.
Very nice. I'm happy to go next. So I keep thinking to myself, would this, like, Pat asked this question earlier, would this film have been better with Sean Connery as James Bond? And I feel like it's one of the reasons why this film, to me, is such a great film, is that there had to be a lot of creativity and thought put into the film, considering it wasn't going to be Sean Connery. And as a film, it is complete. It has a very wide emotional range, a cast that is very strong, that is able to really hide a bit of the weaknesses, one would say, that we'd get with Lazenby. But at the same time, even then, Lazenby does put up a very, I think, Pat, you said it best, acceptable performance. At a few points, the plot does feel to plod on a little bit. Pacing seems a little slow and sluggish at times. But at the same time, I feel like in terms of storytelling, in terms of emotional depth, in terms of the ability to provide a very grounded James Bond experience and complete storytelling from that perspective, I thought was very, very impressive. Overall, when you add that together with the fact that we had incredible score, photography, editing, cinematography, this film, I can see why people look back at it and say it is like a top tier Bond film. And again, credit to Lazenby, he's not Connery, but was able to lead this film. And at the end of the day, it is something that I can look back and say, I can appreciate this. I can definitely appreciate this, especially with, as my tastes have changed over time, these are all the things that I admire. Being able to embrace the unconventional, or moving away from some of the tropes and from the quote unquote Bond formula. While at the same time, there are still some things that still are a part of that formula in the film. While not a perfect one for me, I think that this is a very, very good film. I think that it's definitely one that viewers, if you haven't seen it, go watch it and let us know what you think. For me, this comes in at a B+.
Despite the downgrade from Connery to Lazenby, who was simply not a real actor, like we mentioned, and despite the plot really truly being goofy in parts, I do give it points for being faithful to the novel. But yes, Blofeld's plot is bananas. This is the last example of pure classic Bond. It is one of the best in the series. It is one of the rare entries that can stand on its own as a film. Visually and thematically, it's pretty unique to the series. The settings are some of my favorites. I love how it's shot and how it's edited. John Barry's score is probably his finest contribution to cinema. Diana Rigg is exceptional, and Telly Savalas is my favorite on-screen Blofeld. I really like that Nolan quote, where there's a tremendous amount of balance of action and scale and romanticism and tragedy and emotion. I think he put it very, very well. The level of romanticism in this film was never previously seen in the series, nor will likely be replicated again. I think we briefly got it in Casino Royale, and that was about it. This certainly would have been better with Sean Connery. We might be talking about the best entry in the series, depending on which version of Connery, of course, we got. It's always going to be a what if, but I don't think Lazenby's performance ruins it for me. I absolutely love this film. It's top 5 Bond films for me, possibly top 3. I watch it of recent years, I've been watching it every year around Christmas. And there are some absolutely ridiculous things about this movie, but the highs are so high in this film that I rate it an A. Nathan, I'm glad you liked it.
I did. Again, I was unsure, but I felt it really came together towards that end part of it, and something we didn't get to talk about is I did like actually bringing Draco back was really good. Had the great, fun helicopter scene at the end, and these things really added to the film. I think really helped in my mind, but it was fun to watch.
Yeah, and Nathan, I'm glad you enjoyed it, despite you didn't see the director's cut that included the Telly Savalas and Irma Bunt love scene. And that really inspired the Austin Powers Dr. Evil and Frau scene as well. So
yeah,
very bold move.
10 minutes and counting. Well, Nathan, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on again.
Yes, absolutely, guys. Thank you so much. I know now I'm going to have Bond movies on my list to catch up on.
Yeah, well, you got plenty to watch.
Yeah.
They're a lot of fun. That's it for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Next week, I think, Anton, we're going back to the disaster genre.
Yes, we are, with someone that we've been talking about a lot lately, a Mr. Roland.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Nathan, so we got the 20th anniversary of a Roland Emmerich film that we're going to be covering The Day After Tomorrow.
Oh, man, a classic. It feels like it plays on cable all the time. I mean, who watches cable anymore?
All the time.
Remember, it's like, yeah. After this point is where Roland Emmerich starts to fall off, but you can have an appreciation.
Yes.
I mean, because up to this point, I mean, I think you've got. Anyway, we're not talking about The Day After Tomorrow, but I think there's something to be said where if you like what he does, then this is still fitting that space. After this point, it's not fitting as much. But anyway.
It goes downhill, and it goes downhill fast.
Yes.
We will save the rest of that for that episode. Anton has remained deathly silent on it.
I'm trying to process if I actually do like this film or not.
I mean, it's idiotic.
Well, we'll talk more about it when we record.
And then later we're going to cover the sequel to The Day After Tomorrow, where the Weather comes back to extract revenge on Earth after Randy Quaid successfully blew it up in the first film.
Yeah, it was the film, of course, was the one where The Rock fires the machine gun into the fault line, San Andreas.
Right. I think it's called The Day After Tomorrow, Rainy Monday or something.
What?
Yeah, it's a great
You didn't see that one, Nathan?
Great film.
Yeah.
No.
Or The Weather Comes Back for Revenge?
No.
Oh, okay. It's a thriller. But okay, we should probably just stop. Yeah, that is it for On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Next week, we will be back with The Day After Tomorrow, and we will see you then. Until then, take care.